most recently with Yemen. So she's no stranger to complexity nor to development. And I think, Sarah, I'm glad you were able to participate in the first session with Irena as well. And for us, it's fascinating to see from a reform perspective what the different models of leadership, the different approaches that our resident coordinators are bringing to help lead country teams in very different settings. Nepal is obviously going through still various kinds of transitions, and the opportunity you have to lead the country team there and bring the best of the capacities, the mandates, the comparative advantages of different entities that constitute your country team, both those physically present in Kathmandu as well as elsewhere, will be really important for us to understand. I hope that you can speak a little bit to your perspectives on whether or not the reform has made a difference. Please be frank in terms, you've heard some of the questions that came up also in terms of expectations of headquarters, of different styles of leadership, of the expectations and understanding of the people, to what extent the nexus is an issue, and anything else that you would really like to comment on. This is, as you can see, a free-flowing conversation, and you have many colleagues from DCO, but also colleagues from across the system. I would give you the floor, but those in the audience, I would ask you to already begin thinking of your questions and perhaps post them in the chat so that we can have a free-flowing conversation. Over to you, Sarah. Big welcome. I'm sorry I can't be there physically to welcome you, but so grateful that you've taken the time to join us.
Thank you so much, Rosemary, and sorry that I'm not also in person in the office because I got under the weather, as you know, and I didn't want to take any chances.
You and me both. That's why I'm home as well. Over to you.
Yeah, but such a wonderful, for me, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you all. And it was really good to listen in to my colleague from Iraq. And so I had pre-planned a few points I wanted to raise and share, not necessarily so much about being an RC in Nepal or about that, but really about Nepal itself as a country with peculiarities and some of the different challenges and opportunities we have had as the UN, as a family. But as you asked about the reform, then I think Nepal would be one of the few countries that have not fully taken on the new RC system, the reinvigorated RC, through a formal mechanism as requested by the Secretary General. Nepal, for political reasons, I would say, has not yet agreed officially to having an RCO, and they have not replied to Secretary General's request. Now, I think they saw this as an opportunity for them to demonstrate their dissatisfaction with our push on human rights, which they thought was for whatever reasons, were too strong, but they were appropriate because the issues needed to be dealt with. And they used the reform, the General Assembly, the Resolution 72-279, where you have those two key caveats around the UNCT configuration, as well as reporting to the government. They've taken those in a different light and have used that to create a stalemate around this. This is now moving forward in the last few months, and we expect soon to have that officially in writing that this has been taken on. But it has been a couple of years that we've had this stalemate in Nepal, but it is moving forward. And I think one of the reasons why it's moving forward now is because of the role of the RC in the last period of COVID. The last 18 months, almost 2 years, has been really devastating for Nepal, especially with the second wave. And Nepal, not known to many people, had a second wave on par with India, where we had the same case per capita as India, and we had the highest test positivity rate in the world. It reached the highest, 48% at its peak, where when you were talking about 10% in some countries, it was a scare. Nepal reached almost 50% test positivity. So we had the same scenario with people outside on the grounds of hospital. Really, really difficult period for Nepal, intersecting with monsoon crisis, intersecting with flooding and landslides and so forth, and the strategies for monsoon coping and for dealing with displacement and so forth were COVID super spreaders. And this is where the role of the RC for Nepal, especially Nepal, and I will tell you why it's specific to Nepal. This is where the role of the RC in Nepal was critical. The RC in Nepal is not an HC, and so you don't have that luxury of having that mechanism that you can draw on as an HC. However, Nepal is probably the only one, or maybe one of the few, that has legislated the humanitarian architecture for disaster response and so forth. So having that as a legal framework, what I was able to do as RC was to ask government for activation of the humanitarian architecture. And that was a formal process with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I gave them the data. I told them this is a catastrophe waiting to happen if we don't act, and this is what we have to use. The outgoing RC, who was there before me, had done a wonderful job in unofficially using the mechanism, right? So it was functioning at an unofficial level. So officially activating it meant that I was just escalating it. And then that gave me the opportunity to develop with the country team, with all of the partners, with civil society. We were able to develop a COVID response plan. And OCHA, I think OCHA is online. They can tell you, I think it's the only country where you had a dedicated COVID response plan in a country where there was not a humanitarian crisis as considered by OCHA. And so in doing that, we then had the space to be able to actually mobilize resources and discuss with, bilaterally with donors and so forth around humanitarian needs. And this was unique to Nepal, and OCHA regional office was very supportive in helping us to get this going. But I shared this because this was an era where the RC was able to mobilize in a non-traditional way and bring civil society and donors around the table. Now, I added donors to this because I had the Yemen experience, and I saw where when donors have that fear of missing out or they don't understand what's happening, they can be spoilers. And so bringing donors to the table also, so the humanitarian country team consists of the traditional ones, the Red Cross and so forth, but also then the key donors who have been in the past supporting humanitarian action and civil society. And that allowed me space to bring in some NGOs in some of the clusters with that. So I was able to bring in CARE, I was able to bring in SAVE and other humanitarian NGOs into that space. Linking that to the nexus, a very important piece, is the fact that we have an International Development Partners Group. That group currently is chaired by myself and the EU ambassador. And during this period, this 18-month period, we weren't the co-chair. We just became the co-chair in July. But in this space, acting as the local HC for the UN with government and looking at the humanitarian needs, I was able then to be a part of a small consultative group where we agreed, a few of us, that we need to bring, because the IFIs were on the development side. They were not sitting in the humanitarian architecture. They were not comfortable sitting there. So how we bring the two pieces together, we developed what we called a consultative cell that brought myself with WHO and UNICEF from the humanitarian side, and that brought the IFIs and few donors that were on both humanitarian and development into a consultative cell. So issues coming from the Development Partners Group and issues coming from the HCT, we brought them together and identified high-level strategic joint advocacy points. And we had joint advocacy team leads. And so I'll give you a concrete example where we had civil society difficulties on the development side. We had INGOs shrinking civil society space, weren't getting grant agreements approved, weren't getting project agreements approved. Some of these same NGOs had humanitarian action, and they were stuck. What I was able to do as local HC was then convene meetings with those responsible for COVID and monsoon to then leverage that space to get grant agreements and project agreements for development and humanitarian action approved. we had almost 30 million that was stuck, and we're able through this process to get most of it cleared. We only have right now, up until a month ago, only 4 million was remaining to be cleared, to be approved. So this was a concrete example of how we could bring the two pieces together and how the role of the RC was critical in doing that. And I think for us as a team on the ground in Nepal, this was very strategic because this action actually paved a way and opened a space for the overarching issue we had with government on implementing the reform. They now saw a value add of the RC in this space that they needed. For example, the government of UAE, the Nepali government reached out to many governments asking for support and for help. And being the RC and having a previous relationship with UAE from Yemen, I was able to reach out to the Minister of Foreign Affairs directly and appeal to her and back up the request made by the government of Nepal. And with that appeal, she was able to send in 2 plane loads of supplies. And the Nepali government was aware of the role of the UN in moving that request. And so it was pieces like that during this period that opened the eyes of the government of Nepal, especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to understand how important this role is for them, this reinvigorated RC function and so forth. And actually it's during this space that we started to see movement on that agreement, on that process of approval of officially recognizing the RCO in Nepal. The other piece I think is important to share in relation to that is the SURF, and this tool that we have had as the UN for the Socioeconomic Recovery Framework. Locally in Nepal, the World Bank was pushing something parallel with government in terms of recovery, the 3 Rs, and it was seen as a competition between the UNRC and the World Bank. It was seen as a UN country team fighting for space, and the government with the Ministry of Finance was really fighting, with World Bank to have that push for the 3 Rs, because there were instruments being attached to that. There were grants and loans being attached to that 3 Rs. So for the government, they saw the dollars, and we didn't have the funding to back up that SURF. And so what was important for us to do was to recognize in the moment as the UN that this is the direction government is going, and we need to find a way to fit ourselves within this space. And what we're able to do is leverage the International Development Partners Group. Definitely send clear messaging that the UN is here as a partner, not a competitor, and we would like to be part and parcel of this. We already have the SURF, which has had extensive consultations, and we can offer that as our as additional. And UNDP did a fantastic job in leading that SURF. They did a fantastic job in all of the consultations and putting that together. And so we had that already as the UN, as a contribution we could make to this process. And so with UNDP leading on our behalf at the technical level, with the RC leading at the advocacy level, all of this was not integrated into the green, resilient, inclusive development strategy that the World Bank was pushing. And we went along with it. We used it as an opportunity to demonstrate our value add. And UNDP and ILO continue to participate. And what we have had recently is the Kathmandu Declaration. And we had DCO Regional Office, Neil participated in that as well. We invited Neil to participate. And what we declared there was that all of us as a development community will be working on a green, resilient, and inclusive development strategy. And for us as the UN, looking at our new UN SDCF process, we'll make sure that all of our strategies and actions will be targeted towards ensuring that green, resilient, and inclusive development for Nepal. That's linked also to the LDC graduation. Nepal is one of the countries that is being considered for graduating from being an LDC. And it's something of much pride for Nepal, something they take pride in, although you have a divided house in Nepal, with the private sector really not being too keen on it because of what they see as a loss of benefits. But this is an opportunity for us as the United Nations family. And what we have been able to do with this is not use the word use, but to leverage the IDPG co-chairship, which I now have, to present to international development partners the opportunity of the LDC graduation and how we can come together as partners to support the government in this government-led process. And I was able to do a presentation for the Development Partners Group, but then also link that with those in HQ, and also with the permanent mission in New York and in Geneva, looking at how we can have a process that ensures that we bring the best of the best technical support from all of the partners to support the government. They have appreciated the UN's role in bringing this together, because we have had the UK going separately, we've had the World Bank going separately, and what we've been able to do is to demonstrate to them why this doesn't work in their best interest in terms of consolidated technical support. The Prime Minister and Chief Secretary of the government have bought into this, and the Perm Rep in New York have bought into this, and so now they're looking to us for that leadership to bring the pieces together. And of course, in this particular space as well, UNDP plays a key role, but one of the things to stress here is one of the things that UNICEF said, and I will quote UNICEF, on the issue of social development, and making sure that the value add of the UN in terms of inclusion, and that piece on inclusion is where, with leaving no one behind, we have comparative advantage, and ensuring that we bring that as well, because even in the push for the green, resilient, inclusive development, the IFIs are looking at infrastructure, they're looking at energy, and they're looking at a lot of the hardware, and where we as the UN, we have a lot of the knowledge, we have the experience, we have the comparative advantage on inclusion, on making sure that the most marginalized are reached. We have the expertise in-house in so many of the agencies in the work they're already doing on the ground. And this is how we're pushing that and demonstrating our value add. And the role of the RC there is critical. I would like to, I can't leave this space without talking about I don't want to leave this space without talking about the work of the agencies during this period of COVID. I think it's very important on how we care for ourselves. And I can't, it would sound like I'm being selfish if I tell you that we have like the best country team. But really, when it comes to COVID leadership, it's just been a stellar exercise. It's been a stellar response, with ILO rep leading on COVID coordination, UNDP rep, local vaccine deployment coordinator, the IOM migration clinic being converted into a UN clinic, and us being able to take over. We were able to take over a floor of a hotel and turn that into an isolation clinic for UN staff, for UN personnel and dependents and secondary dependents. And we're able to do over 10,000 jabs, where we now have other missions asking us to do their vaccinations for them. I think it's important to note what the team has been able to do under very difficult circumstances. And really, really, with WHO and UNICEF, technical support to ILO, UNDP, and IOM, everybody coming together, we've been able to really demonstrate how we can lead by example. And I think that even the country, the government learned from this, because now they've asked us for support in terms of scaling up vaccinations. The question you asked earlier, Rosemary, on cross-border, I think I want to make a comment on that, especially in relation to the Green, Resilient, Inclusive Development Agenda. And we don't take credit for this at all, because this is all Bhutan. The RC in Bhutan, Gerald Daly, has been fantastic. We have December 11th will be International Mountain Day. It will also be the 50th anniversary of Bhutan joining the UN. And what Gerald has been able to do is to link me with Deidre in India. The three of us are working on having a celebration of the mountains, for lack of a better terminology, with signing a declaration during that period of time. And that's really supportive of our grid agenda in Nepal as well. We've been able to link up with ISIMOD. ISIMOD sits in Nepal, so I've engaged ISIMOD because they look at the Himalaya Kush region. This region of mountains, often referred to as the third pole, is retreating and is shrinking. And the Himalaya glaciers are not only a symptom of a broader climate change issue, but a unifying symbol of global system imbalance that calls for urgent action. 2 billion people depend on the water from the glaciers of the Himalaya. So this is really, really huge. And this is an area where, we've been able to look at having a one-day workshop with the College of Natural Resources, and really bringing in the technical, bringing in the strategic, and looking at how we can, as the UN in these three countries, come together to really lift the issue of the shrinking Himalayas. And like I said, it's Gerald's doing. He conceptualized this and reached out to Nepal and India, and we're all on board to do this together. There should be a communication coming to the DSG from Gerald, from all of us around this. But I'm really excited about this, because it also then, right on the back of the Kathmandu Declaration that we just had, we're able to already have this action. And UNESCO and UNDP are already, offering their availability to lead on this activity. So this is something we're really excited about. The UN reform and donors and resource mobilization. The view of donors locally in Nepal is that the UN is just there with a bag asking for money. This has been a view of the UN. And in trying to really, and we do want their money, that's the truth. But we have far more than that we offer. And I think really changing the narrative around our offer and our value add is very important. And so what I've been trying to do is to not have money conversations upfront. So for example, in taking on the role of co-chair of the IDPG, I offered that the UN going forward would be the permanent secretariat for the IDPG, the International Development Partners Group. And the first question I asked, will you need money for that? And my response was, no, we may down the line, but let's see how it goes. We have a partnerships colleague in the RCO who can support with the secretarial functions, and if this goes beyond what we think it is, then we can look at what we need. But just really offering our services in a way that does not put a tag, a money tag on it, I think is very important. And I've seen an appreciation from the donors on this, because we're now doing a review of the IDPG, and we're doing a lot of work with working groups and so forth, and we're doing all of this without asking for anything. And it's really demonstrating how the UN can play a key role on development coordination without it being about a proposal or a concept paper and so forth. And the World Bank actually offered us a staffing, and I said, let's look at it in December. Let it not be the first thing we do. Let's look at it in December. Let's look at what we've been able to achieve, what's needed for 2022. And that comes in. And I got the feedback from the EU ambassador. She said, when she joined, the narrative she heard was the UN is just here for our money. All they want is our money. She said, I'm glad you're correcting that. And so it was good to hear that. It's not because that's all we're doing, but that was a perception. In the UN and in the international community, perception is reality in that regard. So working on that perception is very important. And I think the way we've approached LDC graduation, the way we've approached GRID, and the way we're approaching this IDPG co-chairship, those are all areas where we've been able to demonstrate our value add and demonstrate how we can the coordination with the RC is important for them. The IFIs, I would say World Bank and ADB being part of that consultative cell we had. And for example, they needed us for vaccines. The World Bank wanted the government, and ADB, they wanted the government to use their funding facility for vaccines. And they needed the UN. They needed the UN for that advocacy. It was one of the advocacy points we had in the consultative cell. But what I can share with you is that as soon as the vaccines were procured with World Bank and ADB funding, World Bank and ADB didn't see the need for the joint consultative cell anymore. They felt, we already have you, Sarah, you're leading on the humanitarian side, and we're all doing the development thing together. No more need for the consultative cell. And I think this is an area where we need to be really honest about it, where we're used when people need us sometimes, and where we're kicked to the side when people feel they don't need us. And what I was able to do is to have conversations with some really strong women. So it's girl power right now in Nepal. So the EU ambassador, Australia, US head of mission, Swiss, we're all girls, all women. And so we call ourselves the leading ladies. And so we have a leading ladies conversation. And what I was able to do there was to share with them the need for us to continue this consultative cell, for us to continue engaging with the humanitarian development. And so it should not be about whether or not somebody has their advocacy action ticked off, but how do we continue to leverage this space to continue to have this joint advocacy for humanitarian development. And so we're able to win that battle. So we're continuing the consultative cell on an as-needed basis. And I think, but it's important for us to note that sometimes what we agree globally in terms of partnerships and so forth on the ground, sometimes it's transactional. And sometimes some of the partners see it transactionally. And it's work in progress for us to continue to strengthen the need for more of a strategic partnership and engagement. Lastly, I want to touch on the issue of the math, because you asked that earlier, Rosemary, you asked about the math and you asked about how it's working. When you have a really good country team with country, with agency reps who are just there for the work, it works. And that's what we have in Nepal, right? You have a good country team. However, as people move in and out, and people come in with different understandings from different contexts, you have varying degrees of knowledge, and you do have varying degrees of understanding, and you may also have people coming in with baggage from other countries where they have seen something that maybe they felt didn't work in that country, and so they've come already with an agenda. And these are some of the things we have to manage in implementing the math. It's not just as straightforward as it seems. This is a math and you implement it. It really is a process of engaging, and it's continual engagement as we have changes in the UNCT. As you have changes in the team, you have changes in how you need to engage around the math. We've had a wide range of experiences where we had one agency, I didn't know a country rep was even selected for the country, didn't know they were even coming. I only found out about that agency rep when UNDSS informed me that the agency rep had arrived the week before and was asking them for some support. That's when I found out we had an agency rep in country for that agency. UNDP, who was acting rep for that agency, had no knowledge. That's how bad it was. But then you have, and I won't call out that agency, but I will share the name of the agency that I think is gold star. UN Women used a totally different approach. UN Women contacted me when they needed to move somebody out of Nepal to cover a gap in Bangladesh, and then discussed with me what I think they would need to be looking for a representative for Nepal. What kinds of skill sets, what kind of background. We had good discussions about that, and they were pushing for me to be part of the panel. It wasn't approved by the headquarters, but that was what the regional director wanted. And we have a really huge gap between those who are just totally, not complying with the spirit of the math, because it's not about detailed action points and responsibilities. It's really the spirit. It's the spirit of the partnership. And you have those who are going beyond and really reaching out and seeking, and then you have everything in between. And I think the more we can bring people to the middle and to the right side of going towards the gold star, it's going to be something that has to happen from the bottom but also at the top. And I think you all are doing that. You're leading on that. That's continuing to be work in progress, but it's important to note that we do have that variation, wide variation. And the integrator role, I think, is something that we still don't understand that much. The good thing is that we have a UNDP that is working, we're all moving forward together without that understanding of the integrator role, without being very clear. But it's important to note that the lack of clarity around that makes it difficult for everybody. And I think the more we can be clear, either it's there or it's not there. But I think it makes it clearer for everybody if it's there and we know what it means. Locally, we've been trying to define it. So there are different actions that I would tag to the integrator role, and UNDP willingly accepts. But it's still something that needs to be consistent across. I will stop there in terms of key points I wanted to share. Nepal is a country that is politically unstable. We have one seat and 3 men, so they play musical chairs. So you have KP Oli, Sher Bardu Dorba, and Pushpa Kamal Daha from the Maoists. All of them have been 2, 3, and 5 term PMs since 1995. And they keep sharing the seat. And they keep sharing power, and they keep reconstituting their political parties and having alignments. And right now we're in that space where we just had a new government, middle of the second wave, we had a new government installed by Supreme Court decision. I think it's important to note that. And we have a census ongoing and an election that's coming up. And usually you don't do census and election in the same year. But it's all politically motivated. And then we have COVID. And so I've been sharing with everyone who would listen some of the challenges we may have with elections next year. So we're looking at local elections March, April, and we're looking at provincial and federal elections a few months after that. And so it's important just to flag that if you hear something murmuring out of Nepal, it could be linked to these things that we see going under the radar. But I'll stop there. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Sarah. Wow, that was really, really comprehensive. I have to say, it's great that you started out with COVID, because in the context of the conversation with Irena that never came up. And it was so dynamic that I didn't think to ask, but I do recall vividly the pictures on the front pages of the newspapers about the relatives unable to get near the bodies of their deceased relatives in Nepal, and how wrenching that was. So to hear how the country team came together in the response to COVID is really heartening. I think you also talked about climate change, which is obviously very much on our minds this week during COP26, and the impact that it's going to have not just for Nepal, the sub-region, but really the entire region is amazing. I see a range of colleagues that are, again, from across the system that are here. Our colleague from DRR, I think, Iria, has posted a comment. Iria, do you want to take the floor? And perhaps Claire van der Veren, I see you online. You've heard very many positive things about UNDP. Can I call on you as well after Iria? Over to you, Iria.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Sarah. I was really delighted to hear, and many things I didn't know about Nepal. But I found very interesting on your point on infrastructure and the role of the UN on inclusiveness, and that's why I wanted to share that knowledge paper that was put together by the IDC Resilience. But I also found very interesting how you explain that this road around the humanitarian disaster response helped you bring in advancing this agreement with the government on the RC. And I think something that perhaps others don't know, I was also very impressed working with Steen and your team on knowing all the investments the RC office is doing on earthquake risk assessment and understanding better earthquake risk, and how also this comes from a learning on the earthquake experience, and how you're really going the mile beyond, not only about understanding the hazard, but also bringing this understanding to the different levels, to the different sectors, and working really a lot on that space. So really congratulations on that work, and very interesting to hear all your reflections also in the NDC graduation. Our director, regional director Marco, couldn't be today here, but he has requested a bilateral meeting with you, because he also has strong interest in supporting UN country teams on integrating risk reduction into the graduation process. He comes from our New York office, where he was very involved in the community development policy, working on aspects related to the graduation. So he really will welcome that opportunity to take that discussion forward with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Iria. I don't know, Claire, am I putting you on the spot? Can I ask you to take the floor? Claire from the Asia Pacific Bureau of UNDP, and my former boss and former RC in Cambodia as well. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, Sarah. Good to see you again. You are putting me on the spot a bit, because I came a bit late from another meeting, but that's fine. Sarah, really very good to hear you, and very insightful comments. Let me pick up on three things maybe. First is very good to hear this cross-border collaboration on the glaciers, Himalayan glaciers. I think if you three RCs are able to pull it off, it'll be quite good on multiple fronts. Because as we know, these are how should I say, this is a neighborhood that hangs together, but also is a slightly uneasy alliance, right? And so I think it's a good, it will also be a good demonstration of the power of the UN, let me say, on the subject matter, but also on the ability to bring issues together across countries. I was very interested to hear you on that point. On the relationship with IFIs, we hear you, and it's we know that you personally, your team, and your predecessors' team had also had been for some time trying to get a seat at the table with the IFIs, the World Bank particularly, and it's really good to hear you describe how you have been able to move that agenda forward. But I also listen to what you were saying in terms of how precarious that position can be, and the ability to sustain it when the IFIs really use us when it's convenient and then leave us when it's not. So if there's anything else that you feel can be done, either through the regional directors team or that, any sort of advocacy that can be carried, through an individual agency interaction with the IFIs, that comes in aid of the collective effort and the positioning of the UN vis-a-vis the IFIs in the country to flag. And the last point is, Hafsa, I was very, very interested also by your point on the leading ladies. We had such a leading ladies group when I was RC in Cambodia, and actually we had a ladies lunch, a leading ladies lunch. I forget how we, women leaders lunch, I think we called it. And it was completely informal, and we convened on a rotational basis. And to add some depth to our conversations, because after a while, sort of going around the table, there's not much else to discuss. We would use the group to give voice to women activists or women artists or, voices from within civil society that we, in our official capacities, it wouldn't be easy for us to reach out to them. So anyway, I just wanted to share this with you. So thanks for the sharing and the insights. Very helpful.
Thank you. And before I give you the floor, Sarah, I just want to give the floor to Alf Blickberg, who is, I think, the head of OCHA for the Asia Pacific. Alf, I know you have to leave, but welcome, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot as well.
Thank you, Sarah, for an excellent briefing. I just wanted to acknowledge the great work being done on the Nexus in Nepal, and it was so nice to hear you highlighting that, and also to hear how you've been able sort of to build on it, to bring in more civil society. So it really sounds like you have a very much of integrated office, or an office that works in many directions, but mutual reinforcing areas of work. So we don't have a presence in Nepal as OCHA, but we support as much as we can from the regional office, and really want to acknowledge as well the good collaboration that has been with you and your staff in Nepal. So we're happy to follow this up. We have an ongoing pilot on anticipatory action and financing for natural disasters, and looking forward to seeing how that goes, particularly next year, and collecting lessons from this year. So thanks again for the good collaboration.
Thank you. So Sarah, you've heard from DRR, from UNDP, from OCHA, from me, and there may be more colleagues. We have another 20 minutes or so. Can I ask you to share your reflections on this round?
So thank you for Iria. I will reach out to you on that. It was really good to talk to the High Representative for OHR LLS on LDC graduation. We had a really good meeting, and so I'll be taking your offer forward when I get back with the team. For Claire, good to see you. And on the point you made on the IFIs, and yeah, it is moving forward, and I will flag to you where we think you can support. I should share that I was specific and intentional in going to the World Bank in DC, and because of previous experience with the World Bank from Yemen, where I led the humanitarian cash, which was a model that's now being replicated in South Sudan and other places. I had some knowledge of some key people in the World Bank, and I decided to reach out, and they actually organized a lunch, which then brought different parts of the house together at the World Bank, so that I would really demonstrate that we're reaching out and demonstrating our value add there, and I raised the issue of inclusion and the LDC graduation, and although they look at those things from a different lens, there are opportunities there for us and so forth. And I think broadening the conversation beyond the country manager in Nepal helps that in that, and I think that's something you all can reinforce. So I probably will be making an ask soon through Neil. I did have a conversation with Connie, and I'll definitely take you up on that. On the issue of the ladies, thank you for the idea in terms of how we can use that space. And I should share with you all that we've been able to, through my office and using some of the networking that I've been able to do, for the first time Nepal will be involved in the Women's Political Leadership Forum. It's a global forum that brings together the presidents, prime ministers, female presidents, prime ministers, parliamentarians from around the world. And our DSG is a co-host, a co-convener this year for the forum in Reykjavik. And I put forth a proposal for the story of the women of Nepal to be told around participation. Long story short, through all of the conversations, they asked me to please serve as the MC for the forum, give me an opportunity to do a Kathmandu Global Forum satellite event, and also to have the president of Nepal awarded. So it's taken on a whole life of its own, and getting the leading ladies also to participate in conversations. It is around Sofa Gate. I think you all remember the story of the EU. Was the EU president with the sofa, with the chair not being available for her. There were two men who were seated and she didn't have a seat. And so we'll be sharing stories of women and how, no matter the leadership role they're in, they still don't have a seat sometimes, a physical seat, or the space or the voice. And I'll be leading on that in Reykjavik. So I'm really excited about that. And linked to that, I will share a light moment. I will share a reflection to make you all big. I hope you all laugh. I think it's funny. So during this joint consultative cell, we're doing these advocacy events, and this was one where I needed, I had an ask. I needed for the government to quickly give us some space to get some things moved. We needed a quick action from the government. Was one of the asks we had, and so we went to meet the chief secretary. So it was myself with the ambassador of EU, ambassador of Australia, ambassador of Switzerland, the head of the FCDO, and the German ambassador. We're all women, only one man. So we get there, we all arrive on time except for the man. And then and I asked him, so at the time I wasn't co-chair for the IDPG, so I asked him, should we wait for him out here? Do we go inside? They said, let's go inside, he's late, so let's go ahead. So we get inside and he's already there seated. We're out there waiting for him and he's already there seated. So as we're walking in, we're deciding on who's going to say what. So I asked him, who opens the conversation there with the chief secretary? They said, well, you secured the meeting. You're the one that made the space for us. You got the meeting for us. So you start the conversation. I said, but I'm also the one that's coming in with this other advocacy point. So they say, no, we do. You open the conversation. Switzerland will come in with the point on vaccines. And then we'll come back to you for your point on the logistics. So we go into the room. We get that he's there. He hasn't been part of this conversation. He has no role because we've divided up the roles. And so we all sit. The chief secretary comes in. He says, okay, so ambassador, he turns to the only male in the room. He says, ambassador, please. And then the EU ambassador said, no, Sarah is opening the meeting. So I spoke. I said the purpose of the meeting. I said, as indicated to you by email and by phone, we're here for XYZ. So I explained and so forth. After I explained, he turns to the German ambassador. He says, please, sir, your excellency, anything else? And so we all said, no, we'll go by the points that we share with you by email. And the first point will be taken by the Swiss ambassador. So the Swiss ambassador gives the point. And after she finishes, the German ambassador puts his hand up. Luckily, we had masks. So if not for masks, I think I would have been kicked out of Nepal that day because I laughed too much. So he puts his hand up and he says, I would like to say something a little bit different from what the Swiss ambassador just said. And so he's speaking, and I'm thinking to myself, he's saying the same thing, isn't he? What is he saying? So he finishes, and the Swiss ambassador nicely turns her entire body around to face him, like her chair, her body, everything. She faces me. She said, thank you so kindly for saying exactly what I already said. I couldn't stop laughing. To say my next point. But on the leading ladies, I wanted to share that because I think it's important that we recognize the fact that although we have women in leadership positions, we have a long way to go in really occupying that space with the recognition that goes with it. But they're just sharing that lightly. Over to you, Rosemary.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Claire. I know you have to leave. Really appreciate you joining us. Colleagues, there's still a bit of time, but perhaps while I wait for additional questions, and DCO colleagues, I'm going to call on you shortly. The graduation is really important, and I don't know if you're aware that there is a facility being set up by DESA to support countries that are either graduating or have recently graduated. And we will be convening a clinic for the RCs that are in this group very shortly. And if I don't know if you're meeting with Elliot Harris of DESA, but if not, that would be a key stop for you, Sarah. May I call on Narmina, who is our Regional Liaison Officer for DCO and sees what's happening from across the region. Narmina.
Yes, good morning, and Sarah, nice to see you. Thank you very much. It was really inspiring conversation. You mentioned at the beginning that one of the reasons why the government have difficulties in accepting UNDS reform and role of RCO was the challenges with the human rights issues and the strong position of UN on that front. So it would be fascinating also to hear from you how the approach is different now. So how as a UN system and as RC, so you are still dealing with these sensitive human rights issues in the country. So I would be interested to hear about that if possible. Thank you.
Great. Lauren, I see you online. I don't know the kind of presence UNV has in Nepal at the moment, but I recall that following the earthquake, we really ramped up, right? And volunteers, Sarah, were a key part of the initial response, especially Nepali volunteers from the College of Engineering. It was quite amazing. So I don't know, Lauren, if you wanted to comment before I hand back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Rosemary and Sarah. Fascinating insights and always welcome. Some good positive examples about leading ladies getting together and supporting in unison there. So just from UNV's side, yes, as Rosemary mentioned, she was actually Deputy Executive Coordinator of UNV through that earthquake, and there was some fantastic solidarity both with UN volunteers but then also engaging with local volunteer groups to respond to that crisis, particularly deploying on an international level engineers to come in really rapidly, but then also engaging with local volunteers, local engineer groups to do rapid needs assessments, to really access communities that were severely impacted, and of course where it was difficult for the UN to naturally reach, where they didn't necessarily have a presence. And I think that was a tremendous moment in Nepal in terms of really recognising that role of civil society there. And so I am actually interested in, when you're talking about the LDC graduation process, the role of civil society generally in supporting that and how they've been engaged, and if you could elaborate particularly on the volunteer groups, I'd certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren. Anyone else before I hand back to Sarah for a final set of remarks? Going once? Okay. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. On the issue of UNV, I've heard the phenomenal story of how we were able as the UN to really hit the ground running because of that mechanism. Right now, we don't have in huge numbers UNVs, but UNV remains a critical part of our team. And UNV sits in the program management team, and UNV also sits in the UN country team, and really we continue to promote and looking at the new UNSDCF process, we continue to promote that agencies look at where we can have, especially national UNVs, where we can have national UNVs. Even in the RCO, we have UNV. We have UNVs in the RCO, and in agencies we do work with UNVs. But I think during COVID, we shared the availability of that mechanism. During COVID, we offered it to government as a way for us to scale up human resource needs. It was not used, but it was more of government's concern around having too many UN hats being seen as the face of the response. And so it was more politicized than anything, but we did make it available. We did have advocacy around that. But the government used another mechanism to scale up, and it was their own mechanism they used to scale up. But we'll continue to advocate for the use of UNV, understanding the value add. In terms of Namina's question, everything we've done over all these years on human rights are appropriate and necessary. I think it depends on how government views something at a particular time. And it depends on other factors as well, what's going on in the country, who's leading and where they see themselves politically, and who sees themselves as being blamed for something that one of these three men feel somebody else was responsible for. So, for example, very, very straightforward, transitional justice. You had a prime minister who felt that two other men were responsible for the issues around the conflict, and why is he being hit with the issues of coming out of that? So you had these kinds of varying views and dispositions that sometimes led to reactions to our statements and to our advocacy, and disagreements with our approaches to advocacy. So what we've been doing this year is just quiet diplomacy, engaging behind the scenes, using interlocutors and so forth. And this is coming on top of what's already been done. So it's a continuation of that, just using a different strategy.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm conscious that you've actually spent 2 hours with us instead of the 1 hour that we had asked you to join. And so I'm really very, very grateful. And I noticed that many of our attendees also stayed for the full 2 hours, and I'm very grateful for that. You talked in your intervention about this sort of informal networking, right? And for us, having this Visiting RC series is important to shine a light on individual RCs and country teams and their specific country context, but it's also a way of developing our own informal networks with colleagues from across the system. So do spread the word that this is something we will do systematically whenever we have a Visiting RC, and that we welcome everyone, but especially those who are in the relevant regional files or the country-specific files as we build up our own networks. Sarah, I want to thank you. I know that you have many more important people than us to talk to, but this kind of sort of unfiltered sharing of your views, right? What's working, what's not, where we have to improve, I think is going to be so critical for us going forward. As we're discussing in DCO headquarters, the first 3 years of the reform are almost done, which was about standing up the RC system. Now we're getting into the messy business of actually implementing and delivering and being accountable for results. And the kind of examples you've given from Nepal actually give me a lot of hope and inspiration. So I want to thank you again. I hope you feel better. Colleagues, thank you. Have a great rest of the day and week. Bye.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.